Steve Jobs. You hear the name and you probably picture the black turtleneck, the huge keynote stages, the genius. But behind that whole legend, there was a system, a method, a playbook really. So today, we're not just going to talk about the myth, we're going to deconstruct the machine he built. Let's get into it.
You've got to understand, this wasn't just some catchy ad slogan. This was the soul of the company that Jobs reinstalled when he came back to Apple. It was a promise, right? A promise to customers and, just as importantly, to employees, that everything they did from that point on would be for the people who refused to just accept things as they are. This one idea, it set the stage for everything.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How did he actually do it? What was the repeatable system that could take a company literally weeks away from bankruptcy and turn it into the most valuable corporation on the entire planet? We're going to peel back the layers of the personality and get right to the principles that made it all work.
And it all starts right here with the core philosophy. See, before a single iMac was designed, before a single line of code was written, Jobs knew he had to fix Apple's soul. He had to give the company a reason to exist that went way beyond just making, beige boxes.
This right here, this comparison really puts the stakes into perspective. Think back to 2007. BlackBerry was king. They owned half the smartphone market. And when the iPhone came out, their executives basically laughed it off. Why? Because Apple's entire philosophy was about risking it all for something new and great, while BlackBerry's was a deep fear of messing with what already worked. And well, the result speaks for itself, doesn't it? One company built the future, and the other one got left behind.
So when Jobs came back in '96, Apple was in a free fall, and he looked for inspiration in a pretty surprising place: Nike. He had this realization that Nike doesn't just sell shoes, they honor amazing athletes and the idea of athletic greatness. So Jobs decided Apple wasn't going to just sell computers anymore. Nope, it was going to sell an ideal. It was going to become the brand for the creators, the innovators, the rebels, the ones who wanted to, as he put it, put a dent in the universe.
Okay, so once that philosophy, that why, was locked in, the focus could shift to the what. Because for Steve Jobs, great products weren't just a business goal, they were the entire point. The products were, for all intents and purposes, the company's religion.
When Jobs got back to Apple in 1997, the company was maybe 2 months from going completely broke. And it was selling this insane, chaotic mess of different computers, printers, you name it. He famously said he couldn't even figure out which product to recommend to a friend. So his first big move wasn't to add something new, it was to get rid of almost everything.
And the story of what he did next is just legendary. He walks into a meeting, barefoot, goes up to a whiteboard and draws this dead simple 2x2 grid. He just says, "This is what we need. Consumer and pro, desktop and portable. 4 great products. That's it. Everything else, gone. Canceled." In one meeting, he saved the entire company by focusing it on doing just a few things and doing them better than anyone else. It was radical focus in action. Now, this was one of his favorite sayings, but let's really think about what it means. For Jobs, simplicity wasn't just about a clean, minimalist look. It was about diving so deep into a problem, conquering all its complexity that you could emerge on the other side with a solution that felt effortless and intuitive.
And the original iPod is the perfect example of this. Remember what portable music players were like before it? They were clunky, confusing, just a pain. Jobs' mandate to the iPod team was simple but brutal. Any song, any function, had to be reachable in 3 clicks, no more. That relentless pressure is what made the iPod feel like magic. It wasn't that the device was actually simple on the inside, it was that the team had done all the hard work to make it feel simple for you, the user.
This one drove his engineers crazy, but it was absolutely non-negotiable. He famously made the engineers on the original Macintosh team go back and redesign the internal circuit board so all the chips would line up perfectly. One of them protested, "Steve, nobody is ever going to see it." And Jobs' reply was simple, "But you will know." He truly believed that real artists sign their work and that quality had to go all the way through, even to the parts that no one would ever see.
So if that's the philosophy behind the products, how in the world do you build a company that can actually pull it off day after day? Well, that brings us to the internal structure of Apple, which, you guessed it, was just as unconventional as its products.
Jobs was crystal clear on this. He hated committees. He thought they were a place where responsibility went to die, and where great ideas got watered down into mediocrity. At Apple, every single task had a DRI, a directly responsible individual. This one simple rule kept the company feeling agile and accountable, just like a startup, even as it grew into a global giant. He wanted Apple to be the biggest startup on the planet.
And that leads right into this next idea. If you hire incredibly smart people, you have to actually let them make decisions. Jobs insisted that Apple be run by ideas, not by a rigid hierarchy. He encouraged what he called wonderful arguments, where anyone from a brand new intern to a senior VP could challenge an idea, even his own. The goal was never for the person with the biggest title to win, it was for the best idea to win, period.
You know, his model for collaboration wasn't some textbook business theory. It was the Beatles. He loved that analogy. It was about four guys who challenged each other, who balanced each other out, and who, together, created something that no single one of them could have ever made on their own. That was his vision: small, brilliant, integrated teams built on trust.
Okay, so now we get to the very core of the engine. This is the part of the playbook that's the most famous, and maybe the most controversial. It's about the leader's mindset and the almost supernatural effect it had on everyone around him.
Ah, yes, the reality distortion field. His colleagues actually named it after a Star Trek episode, which tells you everything you need to know. The classic story is when he was at Atari, he pushed a young Steve Wozniak to create the game Breakout in just 4 days, a task Woz thought would take months. But under Jobs' intense, unwavering belief that it could be done, Woz did it. It wasn't about lying. It was about making people truly believe the impossible was possible, and in that belief, they made it so.
A huge part of this field was his relentless, often infuriating push for perfection. He was famous for hitting the pause button on massive projects, sometimes right at the finish line if he felt something wasn't quite right. After 9 months of hard work on the very first iPhone, he came in one day and told the team they had to start over because he just didn't love it. Imagine hearing that. The pain for the team was immense, but the results were undeniable.
But here's the thing about a playbook. It's only truly great if it lasts. Jobs wasn't just building amazing products. He was consciously building a system, a company, that was designed to outlive him. And that brings us to what he considered his most important creation of all. When people asked him what his greatest creation was, he didn't say the Mac or the iPhone. He said it was Apple itself, the company. He knew that building a culture and a structure that could keep innovating for decades, long after he was gone, that was the ultimate challenge and the ultimate achievement. And the proof that he succeeded is right here in the transition to Tim Cook. Jobs was the passionate, creative visionary. Cook was his opposite in many ways, the calm, brilliant operator, a master of supply chains and logistics. You see, Jobs created the system, and Cook was the absolute perfect person to scale that system to a level Jobs himself probably couldn't have. He was the final piece of the puzzle.
And I mean, just look at the results. After Jobs passed away, so many people predicted that Apple's magic was gone. But instead, under Tim Cook's leadership, the system that Jobs built proved just how strong it was. It scaled to heights that are just mind-boggling. This wasn't just surviving, it was an amplification of the whole playbook.
Which brings us all the way back to our first question. Was it all just lightning in a bottle? The once-in-a-generation magic of a singular genius? Or did Steve Jobs actually leave behind something more? A tangible playbook, a system of thinking about philosophy, focus, and design that can be studied, that can be learned, and maybe, just maybe, can be replicated. What do you think?